Welcome to Oh the Humanities, a podcast produced by the University of New England Center for Global Humanities. Our conversations are devoted to shining a light on the important work being done in the humanities at UNE and other colleges across the U.S. and around the world. My name is Josh Pahigian, and I'm your host.
My name is Chloe Boulle. I'm a third-year student at UNE, double majoring in art and design, media, and history. It is my pleasure to host this special episode of Oh the Humanities, created and produced entirely by UNE students. My guest today is University of New England student Vivian Nunez. Vivian is a senior history major with an education concentration. From the UNE Archives to Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center to the Strawberry Bank Museum, Vivian has worked for and interned with many historical centers and museums during her time here at UNE. Today, we'll dive deeper into why history is important to Vivian, but first, let's meet our guest. Vivian, welcome to Oh the Humanities Student Edition.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. Vivian, I'm excited to dive deeper into our discussion, but first, it would be good to give our listeners some more context around who you are and what led you to choosing UNE and history especially. I know students who are still in the early parts of their academic career would appreciate a little reflection on how you got here. Can you talk to us about your path?
Yeah, of course. So I guess looking at the very beginning, growing up, I always had an interest in history. To be completely honest, I think a little bit of it was sparked by the Mummy series, the Mummy movies. But yeah, I kind of went back and forth between being like a veterinarian or doing something with history. And then I started volunteering when I was probably 14. It was right after COVID. So yeah, 14, 15 at a local historical society. And I basically just did some like light housekeeping duties, some museum tours, and kind of greeted people. And I did some local like research. And so I kind of realized that I wanted to do something in museums with history. And I learned that I really liked talking with people. But the issue with this job was that, one, it was a volunteer, and two, it was like 30 minutes from my house. And so I kind of was exploring other options, and I knew I wanted to find like work soon. And I knew I needed to get my foot in the door and try to explore like different options and figure out like what I want to do, because I was going to have to figure that out in the next couple of years. And so I applied for a job doing catering and rentals at the Fenimore Art Museum. And I worked there seasonally for 3 years. And during that time, I got to kind of see all the different events and things going on at the museum. And I got to see like the education program firsthand and kind of see like what they were doing. And still I kind of was trying to figure out, do I want to do curatorial? Would I want to do archives? Do I want to work in a fine arts museum? Like, where do I fit in the museum world? Basically, I realized after working with kids that I really liked being in the classroom setting, but I didn't want to be a history teacher like everyone else assumed I was going to be when I said I wanted to be a history major. And so then I was kind of stuck again, because I was like, I want to work in museums, but I don't want to really do curatorial, and I don't want to work in the archives. So I realized that I basically loved working with people, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit more interactive. I'm just extremely extroverted, and I love talking with strangers, and I love getting to chat with people and seeing new faces. And I felt like the work in the archives are extremely important, and curatorial, everyone is super important in the museum, but I knew I wanted to be kind of in the front of the house, like working and interacting with like the guests firsthand. And so I decided to major in history, and I was kind of looking around at different schools all over. I'm from upstate New York, so a lot of the options were SUNYs and some smaller universities, but I kind of wanted to branch out a little bit. I felt like now's the time. And if I went to a school super close by, I would not be able to explore and learn and build like new connections, both like with my own personal life, but also like career-wise too. And so I applied around and I ended up getting to UNE and I ended up picking UNE. And yeah, ever since it's been great. So I came in as a history major and I was put in on the education track. And I basically took my first education class my first semester here and fell in love with it. It was controversial topics in education with Heather Sadelier, an amazing professor. She cares so much about what she does. And it really opened my eyes on how important education is, especially to youth, and why we need to kind of diversify the narratives that we tell and the stories that we tell in the classroom, but also I think that transfers to other like educational settings as well. So that's kind of where I picked up like, okay, I think I really want to stay with education. I love getting to look at material and studying it and then also coming up with different ways to teach it. So after I took that class, I started taking some more education classes, took a lot of like policy classes, like law classes with Professor Roche. Of course, a lot of history classes with the amazing history teachers that we have here. And yeah, by last summer, I realized that I wanted to get an internship. And so I applied around and I kind of took a shot in the dark and applied at some bigger institutions, but I applied to Strawberry Bank and thankfully I got it. It was probably one of the best experiences ever. I look back at it and I'm so grateful.
Okay, so now that we've discussed how you got here, I'd love to dive a little deeper into what you do here at UNE. Can you tell us about being an education-focused history major, what that looks like, and how those two fields connect for you?
Yeah, I definitely feel like the track of education or the concentration education ties in really well with history. I kind of went back and forth between picking up another major. So I considered being an educational studies major along with a history major, which would have made me a dual degree student. And they anticipated that it would have added an extra year. And so thankfully coming in from high school, I had a lot of college credits that I took from like dual enrollment. And so I got to take a lot of my history courses off my schedule and like prerequisites and stuff like that. And so I kind of started choosing a lot of like education courses. I really liked, like I said before, like the ones that dealt with like diversity and issues within classrooms and inequality and all different things like that, because I felt like it's a really important topic, especially in the world that we live in today and the various identities that exist within like our communities and even smaller communities too. And I think that working in a museum, you should be well equipped with the skills to help people tell their stories and help like present those identities, especially when you're working with children, because we talk about this a lot, but it's like a window versus a mirror. And so you should be able to see yourself, but you should also be able to see like a window into other people's worlds and cultures and everything. And so I just think that was kind of my vision, and I don't know, I'm just grateful I went with the education route. So
yeah, it's super cool. And I especially love hearing about your path because I feel like as a history major, people often assume you're going to be like a high school teacher.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So your path and where you're taking the education concentration is really cool.
I know. I'm very excited about it because everyone always asks me, this is my favorite thing. Whenever I get asked what my major is and I say, oh, I'm a history major, I get two things. People always assume I'm going to be a librarian, or people assume I'm going to be a high school like history teacher. Mm-hmm. And then I love the shock on their faces when I go, oh no, like I want to work in museum education. And they go, museum education. What's that? And I'm like, oh, you know what museum education is. Have you ever been to a museum? And that's usually the beginning of my line of question. I'm like, well, have you ever been to a museum? And they're like, oh, of course I've been to a museum. And I'm like, well, have you ever like participated in like an interactive exhibit? Have you ever had like a craft table at your exhibit? Have you ever been on a tour? Have you ever had someone like work with you, or like did you go on like a school field trip, stuff like that? And then people realize like, oh, it's like an actual career, like this exists, like, and they just never realized it. And so I'm like, yeah, I want to be a museum teacher.
Yeah.
I want to work in the education department or do like a program coordinator role, stuff like that. So
not only is it an actual career, it's also super important.
Exactly.
You know? So.
Yes, exactly.
So I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I really want to get into Strawberry Bank.
Yes.
So I know last summer, right, you were able to intern.
Past summer.
Yes, this past summer. You were able to intern at the Strawberry Bank Museum. For a little context for our listeners.
Yes.
The Strawberry Bank Museum, located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, is an outdoor living history museum telling the story of a waterfront neighborhood over the course of a long span of history, from the indigenous people dating back to 12,000 years ago to the present day. Could you talk about what it was like interning at Strawberry Bank and share a few anecdotes about how your internship relates to your future goals?
Of course. Like I have been saying, am so incredibly grateful for the fact that I got to work at Strawberry Bank and the experiences I had, both in like towards my career goals, but also I felt like I had a lot of like personal growth and just learned a lot about myself. And so it was a really beneficial experience. But yeah, so I was one of 3 education interns with the education department. But in our house, we got to live on the museum grounds in one of the historical homes.
That's so cool.
Yes, it was a very fun experience. And so we got to live in one of the homes. I believe our house was from the late 1800s, probably. I believe it was 1880s. It was called the Huff House, and it was the intern house. And so there were 6 of us. And so we had an intern for the horticulture, because we have a lot of historical gardens, an events intern, and marketing intern, and then 3 education interns. And so the dynamics there could be a whole podcast themselves. I loved everyone that we got to live with. We're all great friends. But with experiences working, it was really interesting because we spent 3 weeks, when we first got there, we spent 3 weeks doing some lesson prep and research. And so during that time, we did a lot of like office work. And at first I was like, oh, I don't know if this lesson planning is for me. Like it was I loved it and it was interesting and it was fun to like go through the lessons and test all the different things. That was honestly one of my favorite parts, was when we got to like test the lessons and cook and taste test different recipes and everything. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. But things really picked up when the kids got there. And so we had spent all this time and it was kind of like this anticipation, and our coworkers who had been there before were kind of like building up. They're like, oh yeah, like once the kids get here, like it's go, go, go. We're doing a different camp every single week pretty much. And there's 3 camps running a week with 3 different age groups. And so it was we just knew it was going to be a lot, but we had great support staff. Each person had like a camp director and then camp assistants, and then they each had an education intern. So usually you had like 3 or 4 people on your staff, but our camps were extremely diverse in their topics. We did some that were about like nature's healers, which covered like herbal remedies. There was a Puddle Dog Pirates one. They had their role-playing ones. So there was like Victorian adventures, all different things. And it basically covered colonial, Victorian, World War II, like a whole timeline. I primarily worked with the 6 to 8-year-olds, but we kind of switched it up every week so everyone got to experience the age group at least once. And so there were 6 to 8-year-olds, 9 to 11s, and then 12 plus. Yeah. Do you have any questions on like specific projects that I did? I feel like I didn't cover in too much.
It was very cool. I wanted to ask about like kind of a little bit further on the education side. I know you had talked about like playing historical games with the kids to me previously.
Yeah. So I can get into kind of, do you want to know like what our lessons look like?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay. So our lessons consisted of, well, our days consisted of multiple lessons. And so we would do kind of an intro explanation in the very early morning that would introduce our time period, or what specific topic we were looking at, or what specific plants we were going to handle today. And then we had lessons kind of built throughout the day around it. And so each individual lesson was taught by one of the camp staff. And so these lessons kind of ranged between, we did play some historical games. So we got to play, I'm trying to think of one, like Kick the Can, which was a World War II game that was played, especially nearby scrap yards and stuff like that with a old can. That was pretty interesting to see the kids get to play dressed up like little kids from the 1940s next to the Abbott House. And so I'm trying to think of other games that we played. We just did a lot of like colonial toys. We did Jacob's Ladder. The kids got to learn how to cross stitch and embroider and sew. We did a lot of baking, that was kind of I felt like the lesson I always had, which was some sort of cooking or baking. And so the way that our education center is set up is that we have 3 different classrooms. And so the one classroom is called the hearth room, and it has like a traditional colonial hearth. And then there's the cook stove room, which has like a Victorian era cook stove. And then there's like the big classroom that has just like a regular kitchen stove. And so we did baking on all 3, which was kind of cool to see the process. Thankfully for hearth cooking, we had one of the museum teachers who, they were always so great too, but they helped us out so we didn't have to be dealing exactly with the fire and stuff. They had a little bit more experience than I did as an intern. But yeah, it was great. We did some like shortbreads and some sugar cookies, and it was so fascinating to see how kids kind of connected the baking experience, and they were able to see the differences and like similarities to them baking it like at home with their parents or their families, and then baking here. And we would do a lot of like spot the differences. And so we'd be like, what do we see in this kitchen that you don't have at home? Like, what do we see? And so it was great to let them have that experience. And yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, that's really cool too, because I think that kind of shows you like the connection between the history that's around you and your own life.
Exactly. And so that's actually a good point. So one of the tactics that we used to teach the kids was we made sure to draw a lot of connections and like parallels to how they live now. And so that was a really good way to get them to kind of like focus in on and kind of have like the realization that like these are people, this like actually happened, versus like these are just like characters in our book that we're reading.
It really grounds you like in that time.
Yes, exactly. And so we would always ask, I loved, at least in my lessons, to always ask them questions like, what would it be like if you didn't have electricity? You know, things like that. Could you imagine a world where there was no cars on the street? Or have you ever baked cookies with your family? And so it was just interesting to see kids get excited about history. And then I would be able to be like, well, they didn't have vanilla extract. What do you think that they used? And we'd pass around like a little container of rose water, and then they would all sniff and try to guess. It was just a really fun time, and the kids get so into it. And then they're so proud of their creations, whether it's baking or their craft. And we always love to joke. We made pretty much the same sugar cookie recipe every single time. And the kids, I mean, they loved it. Like, they were like, this is the greatest thing I've ever tasted. And it's really just like sugar, flour, like an egg, some butter. Like, it was very basic ingredients. And they're like raving about it. They're asking for the recipe so they can make colonial cookies at home. I was like, oh my goodness, this is great.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
No, I love that. While we're talking about the importance of history, I'd really like to ask you a more philosophical question.
Yes.
So in a time like the one that we're currently living through, where a lot of museums are being defunded, why do you think history is important for especially like the kids you're talking about and students?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to start teaching people about history and different past historical events and maybe patterns throughout history. So, I mean, they're the future generations. These are the people that are going to grow up and be a part of our society and shape our country. And so I think it's important now to use museums especially as like a teaching moment, because you're able to kind of break things down and introduce topics and even make kids feel empathetic and kind of see their own feelings and their self like within another person. And so going back to Strawberry Bank, a lot of things that we did also was read books to the kids that were history based. And we also talked about this in one of my education classes, the importance of like reading books. And like I had said before, they allow you to see yourself, but they allow you to see other people. And you're able to kind of ask questions to the kids like, how would you feel if this happened to you? Or how do you think this character felt? And a lot of the kids really like understood, like, this would make me upset. Like, if I had to leave my family or if I was taken away from my family, like, I would be upset. Like, this is really sad. And so teaching kids, I guess, just the idea of like empathy and like realizing, I don't know, like I had said before, like, these are real people, like, and I don't know.
Yeah. And kind of going back to your education classes that you mentioned before, like the window and the mirror, I think when you're surrounded by history and you can see all of it, it helps you like empathize with other people.
And it helps you connect too.
Yeah.
Like if you know like the history of something, if you know the heritage of maybe your family or people, you're able to kind of embrace the different cultures and appreciate them more, I think.
Like it helps kids become more open-minded to people who are not like them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see how historically people have been othered, and you're able to kind of connect that. I mean, it seems so simple to be like, if you're othered on the playground, but that's like a feeling that kids can really resonate with. And if you can kind of, especially for the younger kids, draw parallels to that in like a historical moment, they're able to see like why that would be hurtful and why they shouldn't do that. And so it was really interesting to see how kids responded with those questions or to those questions.
Yeah, no, it's really important work and it's always super cool to hear about. So thank you for sharing. I know before your internship at Strawberry Bank, you also worked in the UNE archives. Was there ever a moment when your time in the UNE archives came in handy during your summer internship, or where you were like, oh, I already know this?
That's a good question. I feel like absolutely yes. We did some work with making a exhibit. And while I didn't do a lot of exhibit planning that last semester, I did help out Kathleen with putting together her and Elia's exhibit on like diaries of
Kathleen
women.
Miller, our archive.
Education and outreach archivist. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yep.
And so just having the comprehension of like accession label or accessioning items and writing exhibit labels and finding aids and stuff like that were super helpful. I think a lot of what I took from the archives was honestly like skills. I wouldn't say like analyzing, drawing connections, kind of like what I always say, like piecing the puzzle together. So like taking two sources and kind of seeing how they interact with each other, because I did a lot of that with the archives. Dating images. A few of the activities I did with the kids required me to look at different sources and databases and draw from primary sources. So it was really helpful to kind of have that in my back pocket from the archives of having to like read through a bunch of different things and stuff like that. So yeah.
Kind of like building like your knowledge base of like your hard historian skills.
Yes, definitely. I would say so.
Okay. I have one final question for you, which is kind of the big one. I know you're graduating in about a month now.
I am.
Can you tell us about...
It's like 4 weeks. Yeah.
Can you tell us about how you're preparing for postgrad and what kind of plans you're forming for the next couple of years?
Yes. That is a very big question.
I know.
It's a very great question. And so right now I'm finishing up my honors project, which will be completed by the end of the semester.
Fantastic.
Hopefully. Yes, it'll be very exciting. So that's taking up a little bit of my energy right now, or I mean most of my energy.
Can you give us 2 sentences on what you're working on?
Yes. So my honors project is based on the work I did in the archives last semester. I'm curating an exhibit that displays student life from the early 1900s until about 1930. We're specifically covering topics on athletics, social organizations, and then also academic life and stuff like that. And so it covers Westbrook students. Our primary source are scrapbooks that were made by Westbrook faculty and students. And so it's a really fun exhibit. I'm super excited. It's going to be very bright and colorful. They had a lot of cool ephemera and different things in their scrapbooks that Kathleen and I are going through. And so we're really excited to pull out some pieces.
That's awesome.
Yep.
I'm very excited to see that.
Yeah. And we also did kind of to touch into the museum education aspect of what I hope my career is. We hosted a scrapbooking workshop last month in October. That was super exciting for me. So we had all different scrapbooking supplies, and it was kind of a drop-in, so students got to come in and pick out some items and make a couple pages for their scrapbook. And so it was really exciting. Yeah. But plans for graduation, in brief, I'll try to explain them.
Okay, I'm excited.
So I'm looking at different programs for my master's, but right now I'm kind of in the in-between whether I apply now for the fall or if I should try to find a job for the spring or like a year term. And so I've been applying to all different museums, all different organizations, and I'm just kind of waiting to hear back, and then I'm going to decide from there what cycle I want to apply for my master's in museum studies or museum education. So,
well, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
This has been a lovely conversation.
Yes.
I really enjoyed it. So thank you for meeting me here today.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
That's it for this episode of Oh the Humanities. As always, thanks for listening, and feel free to tell us what you thought of this conversation on the CGH social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X.